Hello, and welcome to the side event for AmeriGEO, collaboration between AmeriGEO and the Thematic Initiatives and Flagships for their group on Earth observations. My name is Albert DeGarmo, and I am an international relations specialist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, and also currently have the pleasure of serving as AmeriGEO Secretariat, supporting our leadership in the region. Thank you very much for taking the time for joining this side event. We're very excited for the program we have put together. For us to start off, we actually have a pre-recorded video from General Garcia, one of our co-chairs, who will help kick us off this session.
Estimados representantes de los Estados miembros de GEO, integrantes de la comunidad de AmeriGEO y público asistente a este evento organizado en el marco de la Semana de GEO 2021. Tengan todos ustedes buenas tardes, buenas noches, desde donde se encuentren conectados, y permítanme expresar un cordial saludo y bienvenida al evento organizado por AmeriGEO, esperando que las ponencias y el intercambio de ideas sea de valor y utilidad para ustedes, sus grupos de trabajo y sus iniciativas. El Perú asumió la copresidencia de AmeriGEO junto a Estados Unidos de América y Chile en el año 2019. Y en los últimos 2 años ha sido evidente el progreso de la comunidad americana orientada hacia los principios de GEO. Es por eso que me gustaría resaltar algunos de los temas más importantes durante los pasados 2 años, tales como la suscripción de la Declaración de Aguas Calientes y su plan de acción conjunto, el crecimiento de la Academia Iberoamericana de Geociencias y Aplicaciones, el fortalecimiento de los geos nacionales y el desarrollo de los proyectos pilotos con OGC, así como el desarrollo de infraestructura de servicios basados en la nube para reuniones y conferencias. Han sido 2 años muy intensos, con mucha difusión a través de los simposios de GEO, y este año, que se ha ratificado la copresidencia del Perú y de Estados Unidos de América, le damos la bienvenida a Costa Rica como copresidente de AmeriGEO, con quien pensamos trabajar varios temas, entre ellos concluir los proyectos OGC y difundir la experiencia del Perú en la construcción del GEO nacional, utilizando como eje integrador un proyecto o actividad cuya factibilidad dependa del trabajo de varios actores, así como de que compartan los datos disponibles y de que acuerden la construcción de herramientas, medios, métodos y experiencia para lograr obtener información, valor y beneficio para todos. Esperamos que este evento sea de interés de ustedes y los alentamos a participar, involucrarse y comprometerse en sus países con los principios de GEO y con la construcción de los GEOs nacionales, buscando un futuro donde la interoperabilidad de los datos libres contribuya sensiblemente a una mejor toma de decisiones. En tal sentido, declaro abierto este side event de
Thank you for General Garcia from CUNITA in Peru for providing that brief welcome introduction. With that, I'm going to actually hand the floor over to Paloma Merodio, who is the current Vice President of National Institute of Statistics and Geography, coming from us to Mexico City. Paloma, over to you.
Thank you, Albert. Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me well. They said that there's translation, so I'm going to do some Spanglish. I hope that this works for all of you. So, muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Muy contenta de estar aquí en esta reunión. Esperemos que sea de mucho interés para todos los miembros de la región. El día de hoy, como ya lo mencionaba nuestro colega peruano, pues estamos aquí para hablar sobre la colaboración entre AmeriGEO y algunas de las iniciativas temáticas y los flagships. Hemos trabajado muy duro para poder coordinar los trabajos de la región. Se estableció en 2020 la Declaración de Aguascalientes, a partir del cual hemos diseñado un plan de acción conjunto en donde varias organizaciones de la región están trabajando para fortalecer el uso de la información geoespacial y las observaciones de la Tierra en beneficio del desarrollo sostenible. Hoy creemos que la reunión que tenemos enfrente de nosotros va a ser de mucho beneficio, debido a que vamos no solamente a coordinarnos entre distintas organizaciones en la región, pero nos vamos a coordinar dentro de GEO. Y me parece que esto es muy relevante porque hemos trabajado mucho en coordinar lo que hacen otros organismos, pero también tenemos que ver cómo dentro de las Américas aprovechamos mejor esas iniciativas temáticas y todo el trabajo que están haciendo a nivel global nuestros colegas. Creo que este evento va a ser muy fructífero. La primera parte del evento va a mostrar a las Geo Flagships y estas initiatives y podremos ver cómo cada una de ellas contribuye a las prioridades regionales. En la segunda parte del evento vamos a poder ver la demostración de los recursos con los que contamos en AmeriGEO para ponerlos en la plataforma de AmeriGEO. Entonces, pues esta sesión me parece que cierra la pinza justamente entre todo el trabajo que venimos haciendo a través de la Declaración de Aguascalientes y en donde justamente la semana pasada varios de ustedes nos acompañaron en la 8ª sesión de UNGGIM Américas, en donde se presentaron las actividades regionales que habrá para coordinar los trabajos en materia de observaciones de la Tierra. Hoy, pues veamos todas estas iniciativas y flagships, cómo pueden apoyar las iniciativas regionales para fortalecernos todos. Agradezco muchísimo el espacio y les mando un cordial saludo. Les deseo que este evento sea muy exitoso. Thank you, Albert. Back to you.
Thank you for those words of welcome, Paloma. We greatly appreciate the partnership that we've been developing with UNGGIMA over the last 2 years. And it's only fitting to have you help us kick us off for this event to showcase that strengthening partnership in the region. So we are going to pass it off to Pilar, who will now serve as the moderator for the introductions for the remainder of the speakers. So Pilar, over to you. Pilar, you're on mute.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We're going to have several talks as announced. We will start with Geogloss, and we will have Alisa Whitcraft from NASA. She's the Harvest Deputy Director and Manager. She's also University of Maryland, Department of Geographic Sciences. So the floor is yours.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Looks like it's going to share a whole screen. So you're seeing probably an echo of yourselves. Is that right? Can you see the screen now?
Perfectly.
And I bet it's going to go into presenter mode. We'll see what happens. It's just black for me. Okay. Does this look okay?
No, now it's myself again. You have it right the first time.
Oh, interesting. Okay. When I put it in presentation, it disappeared. How about now? Maybe it finished the sharing?
No.
Okay. I don't know why it's not working. It's funny, we've been doing this for years, not even just in COVID, and there's always a technical difficulty.
I got you.
Now it's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
next.
And then I'll just say next. Perfect. All right, I'm sorry about that technical difficulty. Like Pilar said, I'm Alisa Whitcraft. In addition to my role at NASA Harvest, I'm also the program scientist for Geogloss. You can go to the next slide, please, Albert. And it's my little bio slide. And so I'm program scientist for the G20 initiative Geogloss. I am the founder of the Agricultural Monitoring the Americas initiative, AMA, which is the main thing I'll talk about today. I'm an associate professor at University of Maryland and deputy director and program manager, as was mentioned, of NASA Harvest. I work also with the space agencies on coordinating satellite data for agricultural assessment. I have 2 young boys, one of whom was just here, but thankfully my husband came home and was able to take away the 5.5-month-old baby, so we don't get a baby co-presenter today. And I live and work in Colorado on Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and Oglala Sioux land. Next slide, please. So on the left is just a diagram that shows the rough structure and times of establishment that led to AMA being finally established in 2018. Of course, we know the history. GEO established in 2005, GeoGlam established in 2011, AmeriGEO established in 2015, and under that was this food security and sustainable agriculture area. But at the same time, in GeoGlam, we had a parallel idea that we really needed to focus on the regional networks as a means of implementing GeoGlam more effectively in underrepresented areas globally. And so we launched GeoGlam Latinoamerica. And it was in 2018 that we saw the opportunity to develop a joint initiative that would contribute to both activities. And so who's involved? Public and private sector actors who are engaged in agricultural assessment and monitoring in the Americas. And that's from Canada to Chile, the North, South, Central America, and the Caribbean as well. Our main kind of activities are cross-site research and development, capacity development, data access, supporting data access and discovery, and then facilitating cross-community dialogue and outreach and networking about Earth observations, state of the observations themselves, the state of the science, and new methods and tools for their adoption. The principal funding for AMA coordination is from NASA Applied Sciences, as are some of the trainings and tools I'll present have been funded by NASA Applied Sciences. But what's really important to acknowledge is that the underpinning effort that makes AMA actually function and be something that's really sort of worthwhile to be a part of belongs to really each participant organization. And there's over 20 now. They share their time, their effort, their data, their ideas, and they sometimes participate as trainers themselves. They also put in their own funding proposals in their own countries or international funding opportunities to fund their time. Next slide, please. On the left, I've added in a couple of different slides specific numbered points from the Aguascalientes Declaration. And one of the questions in preparing this presentation was how we sort of engage stakeholders from around the region and how we sort of define mechanisms that establish effective communication in the declaration itself. So in AMA, of course, everyone who's engaged in monitoring or improving agriculture and food security in the Americas is welcome to join. That's public and private sectors alike. We have multiple academic partners. I, for example, am an academic. We also have partners in Canada and in Chile and in Argentina and also in Brazil, who are all in different academic roles. And so, but we also, of course, have representation from space agencies, private and public research organizations, private companies, and national and regional government agencies. One of the ways in which we've defined mechanisms to kind of get people involved and establish communication is through having a formalized invitation process. The invitations are issued by both the GeoGlam Secretariat Director and the AmeriGEO Chair, and they come with the attachment of a clear terms of reference about what their roles and responsibilities are, so they can review this before accepting an invitation. And then also we've established multiple outreach modalities. We have our website, we have newsletters, we have our Twitter account, and those are kind of the main ways we try to keep in touch. Next slide, please. Our work is really driven by national and regional priorities for operational research and development, and I want to highlight the word operational here. So it's not foundational, it's really about what do we need to do to develop the methods and the knowledge to give each national system or each partner in AMA what they need in order to autonomously own their national monitoring and assessment of their agriculture and food production resources. We prioritize lateral, meaning sort of south-south tech transfer, but we also have north-south tech transfer. And again, it's very much aimed at strengthening national monitoring systems in order to generate better, timelier information and supportive decisions. On the right, I give sort of an example of how AMA enabled this relationship between Minagro and INEA, in particular in Chile, and GeoGlam. So AMA is established really trying to bring people into the global GeoGlam context, like I mentioned at the beginning, get them involved and get them the benefits of the global program, but also bring their unique expertise to the global program. And so that was how the relationship was established with this Ministry of Agriculture in Chile. And they held a meeting in the context of GeoGlam that was brought together the 9 services of their Ministry of Agriculture, and it was really the first time that they had all come together to work. The press, there were a lot of press attention. The press kind of got excited about the NASA affiliation. I feel like NASA is one of the most recognized brands in the world, but the article itself is actually all about GeoGlam. So it's in this way that the global systems can actually mandate the national ones. Next slide, please. We've also developed technological repositories in line with the Aguascalientes Declaration, including a resource hub, which rather unfortunately, it's linked from the website, but it's currently down for maintenance. We're moving it to another web server. Sort of bad timing, but it will be back up and revamped and have improved functionality soon. Please click. We've also, with NASA support, redesigned the Global Agricultural Monitoring, or GLAM, system to have improved functionality and more data: temperature, precipitation, soil moisture, evapotranspiration. It's now a truly global system, but we have retained national instances which are tailored for individual use. And they are used, for example, here that you can see in a tweet from one of the directors at CONAB, in their work monitoring Brazilian national production. And so we have versions of this system in Chile and Argentina, of course in Brazil, and then several versions of it in different countries in Africa and a regional West Africa, Eastern African system as well. Next slide, please. This is an example of a really early success for the working group, but I feel like it's always useful to look back at because we've continued to build on it. So we had an initial exchange where we had folks come from Brazil, Mexico, Chile, and Argentina, and they came and did a training with Matt Hansen at University of Maryland. We hosted them and did 5 days where they developed their own national scale 30-meter cropland maps, and they had really good accuracy, is kind of 80 to 90%. The lowest accuracies were in Mexico due to the very complex agricultural landscape they had there, but they were improving with each iteration. It was followed up with a one-day workshop in Brazil at AmeriGEO Week in 2018, I think it was, where we had a Bolivian grad student of Matt Hansen's come down and help them design their sort of statistical sampling strategy to translate it to area. Please click the link. And this is why it's interesting because, AJ, just click for an animation. It's interesting because the work kind of continues to build. And so CONAB, Brazil, this guy, Lucas, participated in both sessions. And he actually now, in their group, they utilize the method for area assessment that goes into their monthly crop monitoring bulletins. And they're very active participants in the global GeoGlam program. And so their participation in GeoGlam actually predates AMA, but has intensified and grown as a result of this sort of regionalization of the GeoGlam work. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. And what I want to just kind of pose here is the ways in which, I've made this point before, how having a global tie to something like GeoGlam actually fosters the development and the permanence of national systems. And so can regional to global participation in a G20 agricultural monitoring effort really drive national system development? And I would say the answer is yes. In terms of making it kind of resilient to changes in personnel and resilient to changes in national priorities, this has been very successful for us globally. But still, we have gaps in South America in particular. The coverage that we have in our global monthly reports on crop conditions in Central America principally comes from FuseNet reporting, which is a USAID program, but we are working now through SICA, which the relationship has grown enormously in the past few years, to see about it bringing them into a global version of the crop monitor, but that really relies on regionally appropriate methods and baseline products and aligning their sort of current national reporting and current national assessments with the GeoGlam crop monitor requirements and production timeline. But nevertheless, it's important, and the policy, I think, really helps get the national systems online. And so we're continuing to look to both the regional system and the global system to work in tandem toward kind of meeting this big goal of bringing Earth observations for food security and agricultural assessment in the Americas. Next slide. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. To the attendants, you can have your questions in the section questions and answers, or preguntas y respuestas, depending on which language you have set up Meet. Our next speaker is Brian Suta from Servir Amazonia. He is the science and data leader for Servir Amazonia in working for a Spatial Informatics Group, and he's currently stationed in Lima, Peru.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. I'm going to take full advantage of the translation, so I'll switch to Spanish right now. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Un gusto estar aquí, muchas gracias por la invitación. Me das un segundo para ver si puedo compartir la pantalla. Un segundo, a ver si me da la oportunidad aquí para compartir como la vez pasada.
Perfecto.
Bien. ¿Sí, sale? Ok, perfecto, muy bien. Ok, muchas gracias otra vez, gracias por la invitación, y ahora para conversar un poquito sobre Servir Amazonía, la idea aquí, es para dar un poco de contexto de cómo funciona Servir Amazonía, también cómo funciona Servir Amazonía a través de Servir Global, y después en unos minutos conversar sobre los enlaces que tiene Servir Amazonía con los gobiernos regionales, gobiernos nacionales, los institutos del mismo gobierno y otros tipos de retos que tenemos, no solamente por la pandemia, pero en general, tratando de tener este tipo de programa, que en fin de día es como un tipo de consorcio, donde todos trabajamos juntos para tener estos productos o servicios para los distintos actores, ¿no? Y los tomadores de decisiones. Entonces, bien, Servir Amazonía es el centro más joven del Servir Global. El Servir Global tiene 5 centros en todo el mundo. Servir Amazonía comenzó a funcionar en 2018 y ahorita está comenzando su 4º año de función. Los otros centros se encuentran 2 en África, uno en Himalaya y otro más en el Mekong. Servir Amazonía en este momento también ha comenzado unos cuantos actividades en el Caribe, ¿no? Y esas actividades va a comenzar y va a continuar por un par de años más. Hay 5 socios en Servir Amazonía. El socio principal es CIAT, que se encuentra en Colombia. El segundo es Special Informatics Group, donde yo trabajo, es de California, pero yo trabajo desde Lima, Perú. También tenemos Imaflora de Brasil, ACA, o más conocido como Conservación Amazónica, que es de Perú, y Ecociencia, que es de Ecuador. Los 5 socios trabajan en unas actividades que nosotros llamamos servicios, y servicios son unos grupos de actividades que es como capacitación o desarrollo de aplicaciones o otro tipo de actividades que se centran en actividades geoespaciales, ¿no? Soluciones geoespaciales, donde usamos las imágenes satelitales para sacar soluciones para distintas áreas de servicio que nosotros trabajamos. Tenemos 4 áreas de servicio en este momento. El primero es la cobertura de la tierra, por ejemplo, cambios de uso de la tierra y ecosistemas, gestión de ecosistemas. Segundo es el riesgo de sequías y incendios. Tercero es desastres relacionados con el agua y también el mismo agua en sí. Y el último es el clima y el tiempo. Entonces, como Servir Amazonía es uno de los 5 centros, tenemos la ventaja de poder tener un enlace con distintas organizaciones a nivel mundial, ¿no? Tenemos enlaces con varias universidades en Estados Unidos. Muchos de nuestros socios, por ejemplo, la Universidad de Arkansas, es uno de nuestros socios, aparte de los 5 que mencioné, que trabajan en algunos temas de incendios, por ejemplo. Tenemos actividades, o en el Servir Global tiene actividades en varios países, pero Servir Amazonía tiene actividades directos con Brasil, con Perú, Colombia, Ecuador y también con Guyana. Tenemos varias instituciones donde nosotros podemos tener acceso a información. Y en fin de día tenemos otras alianzas, ¿no? Alianzas con la FAO, por ejemplo, alianzas con distintas herramientas que son desarrolladas por otros grupos, por ejemplo, como Collectors Online. metodologías o conexiones con Google en sus herramientas, en su biblioteca de TensorFlow, y también tenemos acceso a la tecnología de la NASA, ¿no? Servio Global, y también como Servio Amazonía, es un programa que es auspiciado, está auspiciado por USAID y por la NASA. Entonces tenemos acceso a distintos tipos de información y actividades afuera de nuestro programa. Servio Amazonía en este momento tiene 11 servicios o 11 distintas actividades, y en esas actividades incluye países como mencioné, Brasil, Ecuador, Perú y Colombia, y algunos son regionales son regionales en sus aplicaciones. O por decir, hacemos un monitoreo de incendios que incluye toda la Amazonía, pero distintos países y las distintas instituciones dentro de los países tienen diferentes definiciones o tienen diferentes áreas de interés donde quieren sacar información. Entonces nosotros, aunque puede ser que desarrollamos un paquete o una actividad para una cierta institución, lo cambiamos o lo ajustamos a la realidad para otras instituciones de los distintos países, ¿no? Y así comenzamos a trabajar en nuestro labor de desarrollar estos paquetes geoespaciales o las soluciones geoespaciales. Algo bien importante, ahora pasando conversando un poco sobre nuestro enlace con los distintos institutos y cosas relacionadas a eso. Antes de la pandemia, por suerte de verdad, antes de la pandemia tuvimos estas evaluaciones de necesidades de los usuarios, o más conocido como User Needs Assessment. Y justo el último User Needs Assessment que pudimos hacer era en marzo de 2020 en Ecuador. Antes de eso tuvimos otras reuniones con distintos institutos, las agencias, y pudimos sacar información de qué de verdad al fin necesitaba. Una de las cosas importantes también del programa Servio Amazonía y también con Servio Global es que es un co-desarrollo. Entonces, ¿qué significa eso? Significa que nosotros no solo vamos a desarrollar estas herramientas y lo compartimos, pero lo que estamos haciendo es un co-desarrollo donde los distintos actores o tomadores de decisiones nos indica qué es lo que quieren desarrollar. Y dependiendo en lo que el distinto instituto, la capacidad de instituto tiene, entonces nosotros vamos desarrollando ese servicio. Por ejemplo, si hay un instituto que solamente quiere, o una comunidad, en fin, no solamente tiene que ser a nivel federal o gubernamental, pero si tienen capacidad digital, si tienen capacidad técnico, entonces nos puede seguir, nos puede co-desarrollar desde el concepto hasta el fin, por ejemplo, con el desarrollo de algoritmos o demás, ¿no? Pero también nosotros construimos estas bases de datos, construimos las capacidades, entonces podemos llevar estos grupos o institutos a áreas, a entender cosas más allá de lo que comenzamos, ¿no? En esta tabla que estoy demostrando son algunos de los institutos y agencias que tienen un memorándum de entendimiento o un convenio con nosotros, o ya tienen un plan de trabajo y pronto va a tener un convenio. En Guyana, por ejemplo, ellos están interesados en la cobertura de la tierra o específicamente en el monitoreo de manglares, y esto se está haciendo con NARI. NARI es un instituto del Ministerio de Agricultura y también con la Universidad de Guyana. Y si ves en la lista, cada país que estamos trabajando, desde Guyana hasta Brasil, están interesados en distintas herramientas para ver los cambios de cobertura, ¿no? Muchas veces esto obviamente viene para el Ministerio de Ambiente o Ministerios de Agricultura o los institutos de medio ambiente. Por ejemplo, en Brasil, que es SEMA Acre y FEMAR Roraima, ¿no? Que son del estado de Acre y Roraima. Para riesgos de incendios, tenemos un grupo que están específicamente interesado en el monitoreo de incendios y sacar información para poder prevenir, monitorear y prevenir los incendios. Y en este momento estamos enfocándonos en Ecuador y en Brasil. Y lo último, tenemos un paquete de servicios y institutos que están interesados en los desastres relacionados con agua y el agua, por ejemplo, como inundaciones, ¿no? Hacer el modelamiento. Y justo más tarde, uno de los expositores, el profesor Jim Nelson de la Universidad de Utah, él es el investigador principal que está llevando estas actividades sobre inundaciones. Entonces, lo que es importante aquí es que con el User Needs Assessment podemos entender lo que necesita cada grupo. Obviamente, cada grupo tiene cosas que cambian en el tiempo. Por ejemplo, sus intereses cambian en el tiempo. De repente, por ahí hay un cambio de administración o de repente hay cambio de tecnología. Entonces, nosotros tratamos de ayudarnos a seguir ese camino para poder crecer con ellos y co-desarrollar estos paquetes juntos. Aquí lo interesante es que también es que cada país, como mencioné antes, tiene sus propias prioridades, ¿no? Y obviamente algunas de sus prioridades cambian en el tiempo y eso lo voy a mencionar en unos segundos. Pero porque cada uno tiene su prioridad, nosotros tenemos que entender que la herramienta que hemos desarrollado para un grupo lo tenemos que actualizar para otro. Puede ser que tiene una definición diferente de bosque, puede ser que solamente necesitan información de ciertas temporadas, y eso es importante de entender antes que entramos o es importante entender antes que ofrecemos una solución, ¿no? Porque muchas veces eso cambia en el tiempo y tenemos que saber qué específicamente necesita. Y lo que es más importante de ese entendimiento es que también queremos la sostenibilidad de estas herramientas, ¿no? De estas actividades. Entonces, si estamos ajustando para cada instituto su realidad, su necesidad, entonces tenemos más chance que eso sea sostenible en el tiempo. Y no estoy hablando tanto como el sostenibilidad financiero, pero más bien el sostenibilidad del mismo tecnología, los flujos de trabajo, y para que obviamente los tomadores de decisiones puedan tener esa información y lo pueden utilizar, ¿no? No solamente que sea algo que se guarde ya en el gabinete y después no se utiliza después que se ha creado, pero más bien obviamente que lo pueden usar en el tiempo. Entonces, con eso termino. Mencionar unos cuantos fortalezas y debilidades de cómo se relaciona con los tomadores de decisiones, cómo nuestra interacción, ¿no? Tiene sus fortalezas y debilidades. Obviamente estamos hablando esto todo abajo del contexto de COVID, entonces después de que pasó la pandemia, nosotros tuvimos que hacer todo virtual, como seguramente muchos de ustedes, y recién estamos tomando los primeros pasos para tener los reuniones presenciales, pero obviamente no es muy frecuente, es solamente unos cuantos en el mes. Entonces, la fortaleza para nuestra comunicación ha sido porque nuestros socios son locales, ¿no? Entonces, tenemos el programa obviamente auspiciado por USAID y la NASA. La oficina central está en CIA, pero todos nuestros socios están en los distintos países. Yo justo estoy en el Perú, ACA también está en el Perú, y Maflora en Brasil, y Ecociencia en Ecuador, ¿no? Entonces, cada uno puede conversar directamente con los co-desarrolladores o los tomadores de decisiones para entender exactamente, ¿no? Lo que está sucediendo, qué necesitan. Podemos construir las relaciones con los tomadores de decisiones locales, entonces podemos conversar directamente con ellos y puede ser desde una reunión mensual o puede ser reuniones ya más formales, obviamente tratando de sacar los provechos de todas estas herramientas y para que ellos lo puedan utilizar en el tiempo. Y tratamos también de hacer formalización, ¿no? Con el convenio, con el memorando de entendimiento, un plan de trabajo, donde no solamente lo que hacemos va a ser nomás algo abstracto, ¿no? O menos, un poco ambiguo, pero ponemos fechas, ¿no? Tratamos de poner fechas, obviamente flexible por la pandemia, para poder hacer las cosas en la forma que necesitamos hacer. Lo último, obviamente, es las debilidades. Todas las reuniones son virtuales desde la pandemia, entonces es un poco diferente esa interacción entre todos. Justo nosotros tuvimos un reunión ya presencial en Ecuador hace poco y había mucha información que pudimos conversar cuando era presencial. Pero, en fin, también podemos tener esas reuniones virtuales con todos los países, como estamos haciendo justo en este momento, y podemos por lo menos sacar información y conectarnos, ¿no? El instituto está dispuesto a trabajar, también tiene que estar dispuesto a trabajar con el socio local, ¿no? Entonces, algunas veces los distintos gobiernos o los institutos, agencias federales o del Estado, algunas veces trabajan con los socios locales, algunas veces tienen sus propias ideas y sus propias prioridades, ¿no? Entonces, eso algunas veces complica la interacción, ¿no? Mientras que nosotros tenemos todo el mismo mensaje y entendemos qué son las necesidades de cada uno, entonces podemos ir adelante. Eso sí es definitivamente que cada servicio es como su propio mundo. Otra cosa de debilidad, y yo sé que todos ustedes seguramente conocen bien, es que hay cambios frecuentes, ¿no? En algunos países, ¿no? Hay cambios frecuentes de tomadores de decisiones, con cambios de gobierno, con cambios de política, las prioridades y lo demás, ¿no? Eso entonces puede causar que se desmoran muchas cosas. Y el último, que es algo relacionado también con esto, es que estos memorandos de entendimientos y los convenios caducan, ¿no? O en fin de día no se cumplen por X razón, ¿no? Entonces, es importante entender que estos metas sí se mueven y lo mejor es para siempre estar en comunicación. Si algo cambia y de verdad al fin de día las herramientas que estamos desarrollando no es necesario, entonces podemos cambiar el enfoque a otra cosa, ¿no? Pero justo ahora en día, y que seguramente con ya todos las presentaciones que van a ver, que han visto ayer y hoy día, hay mucha información disponible, hay muchas herramientas digitales disponibles, y de verdad hay que aprovechar, ¿no? El momento que tenemos todo eso disponible para que todo lo podamos utilizar, ¿no? Más bien, muchas gracias a todos por el tiempo, y si tienen preguntas, en cualquier momento nos podemos estar en contacto.
Much, Bryant. We will answer the questions afterwards. And right now we have a change in the agenda, and we will have Rafael Monge, who is the director of the National Center of Geoenvironmental Information in the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Costa Rica. Rafael is going to talk about urban resilience.
Muchas gracias, Pilar.
If you can switch to English, because we don't have translation, if possible, no?
Yes, I was planning presentation in English, Pilar. Thank you. I was just saying hi in Spanish. Good to see you all, and thanks to all the people that are joining us here in this side event during the Geo Week 2021. Let me see if I can successfully share my screen. I see my colleagues have a little struggle with that. Do you see my screen right now?
Not yet.
Not yet?
It may take some time.
Okay, it may take some time. I see my screen is like loading, but I don't know.
No, we haven't seen it. Albert, do you have a backup?
If Rafa can quickly upload it to the Google Drive.
No. Yeah. Just give me a sec.
No. Okay.
Wait, there we go. Now we see it.
Yes.
Nice.
Good.
Great. Well, I'll just start. Earth observations data represent a reliable, timely, and continuous source of information for SDG Goal 11 and related urban issues. However, many national and local level governments and local governments and organizations are unfamiliar with or lack the skills to apply observations in support of urban modeling, monitoring, reporting, planning, and decision making. Operational decision. Yeah, my name is Rafael Monge.
Rafael, we have some problem with your
audio. You have problems with my audio.
Do you want to turn off your video?
Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, try turning off your video and this speaking.
I can. How is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I hope I can make it this. Well, after the end of this talk, you know a little bit more about what you can find there in the EU toolkit for sustainable cities and human settlements, and how you can also be part of this initiative. The EU Toolkit for Sustainable Cities and Human Settlements is an online knowledge resource available at eutoolkit.unhabitat.org. that aims to make urban-related EO data easy to find and use, and also help facilitate knowledge sharing, skill building, and collaboration among local communities, cities, countries, EO experts, and different stakeholders from around the world. This project is the result of a collaboration effort between the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, the Group on Earth Observations Initiative, the EO for SDG, and a growing number of contributors from the GEO community. Over 30 organizations from around the world have participated in the development of the toolkit, including representatives from national statistical offices, national mapping agencies, national and city authorities, academia, research institutions, non-governmental organizations, space agencies, and the private sector. This toolkit hosts use cases, data, and tools for SDG 11 applications on housing, open spaces, urbanization, and public transport. Each data set and tool are openly and freely available, have been peer-reviewed, and come from science agencies or funded partners. There are also a number of use cases and resources for continuous learning in these areas. I'm showing some of the screenshots of the website, but I invite you to visit there. This tour is better when we go into the toolkit, but I was hoping to get this a live presentation is better with just these images. Data and tools can be filtered by different parameters, such as data characteristics, coding environment, and SDG indicator, to help users discern application areas and distinct attributes. Among the free and open data sets available in the toolkit, you can find the European Commission's Joint Research Center's Global Human Settlement Built-up Presence that is derived from Landsat images collection that can be used to analyze urbanization, map population, and assess exposure to natural hazards. The toolkit also includes a number of tools that facilitate the production of SDG 11 indicators and enable users to visualize and evaluate available data and more quickly access data of interest. For example, one of the tools you can find there is the NASA SEDAC PopGrid Viewer, which is a mapping tool that provides side-by-side comparison of population estimates, leveraging global gridded population datasets. Another important source of information are the use cases. Here you can find documented real-life success and challenges of cities and countries in using Earth observations and geospatial technologies to fill urban monitoring gaps and address reporting needs or guide policy actions. There are very interesting examples. I want to highlight one from the city of Thessaloniki in Greece and also from Colombia, which are available in this section. Also, you can find supplementary resources, including outreach and capacity development materials, such as videos, user guides, and recording of the webinars. This toolkit is continuously updated with new data, tools, learning material, case studies, and other relevant contributions. We invite you to get involved and contact us using the form that is available in the toolkit, or share your feedback, or submit a case study, or data, tool, or other relevant information. We would love to have more experts, policymakers, and enthusiasts from around the world joining us and working together in this initiative. We have these 4 working groups that are where we organize our work, and also you can see a picture of some of the people that are part of this initiative. For example, Jimena Juarez from Mexico, who's a colleague who participates here. Well, you can see her in the picture, but also we have some colleagues from the region, from the United States, of course, and Canada and Colombia. And if people want to join, there's these working groups on impact, capacity development, bench learning across levels, and fair data principles. That's how the work is structured. And we developed these posters for AmeriGEO Week. Actually, you can find them in English and in Spanish. I'll share them just after I finish this talk in my social network. So you can find it there, but I'm gonna put it there just now for you can easily access these posters. And well, we have this roadmap. I mean, we have because it's in a late stage from where it was developed, and there's a lot of the events and activities that have already happened that were part of this roadmap that we were looking forward to get more outreach of this process. And this is a picture of the people that participated in a side event we had on COP26 just some weeks ago. And now it was an important milestone was to be here and the Geo Week 2021 presenting about this work. It's going to be sharing different events during this week. I'm very happy to be the first one to talk about this during the AmeriGEO Week session. Thank you very much for your attention, and please don't forget to visit the Toolkit website. Feel free to join the conversation on social networks using the hashtag EOToolkit. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Rafael. Las preguntas, les recuerdo, las pueden poner en el chat o en la sección de preguntas y respuestas. You can put your questions in the questions and answers section or in the chat. Due to some problems, our next speaker will be Enrique Motes. He's a researcher at the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in chemistry and ecosystems. Enrique, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Pilar. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And since we have technical difficulties, my presentation will be in English. But first of all, I'm going to start with letting you know that I will be doing this presentation on behalf of Maria Cecilia Londoño, who's one of the co-chairs of GeoBond or Geo Biodiversity Observation Network. And I trust that you can see my first slide.
Yes, perfectly.
Thank you. But also want to acknowledge that the GeoBond Executive Secretariat, Adriana Radulovici, is present here in the audience. So if you have questions, you can direct them to me, and I will try to answer them. But I suggest that you also contact Adriana. So for GeoBond is a flagship activity under Geo that is basically a voluntary organization that is recruiting people all over the world interested in biodiversity as a theme from a multidisciplinary perspective. So we have participants in academia, in government agencies, and independent organizations and NGOs and things like that are all contributing to GeoBond's mission, which is improving the acquisition, coordination, and delivery of biodiversity observations with a focus on the services that biodiversity provides to society. So how we organize biodiversity monitoring and data management across the world in a consistent manner using standards for helping manage our natural resources. GeoBond works around the concept of essential biodiversity variables, which are basically ways of organizing and grouping observations in the field and also remotely sensed. And I'm talking about integration of primary biodiversity observations into essential variables that then can be utilized for reporting the state of the genetic composition of an ecosystem, species populations, community composition, and so on, to large frameworks like the IPBES and things like the past Aichi targets, Sustainable Development Goals, in the form of organizations that are basically providing these type of observations as part of national and regional bonds, but also as part of thematic bonds. the essential biodiversity variables are considered a minimum set of measurements that are complementary to one another. They can capture the most important and major dimensions of biodiversity change. So this framework is basically targeting or organizing data around detection of change in these different areas that are relevant to understanding why biodiversities change over time and space at a particular place, but also with a focus on policy. These EBVs need to be very sensitive to change. So this is an important criteria. They need to be biological state variables, and most importantly, biodiversity state variables, taxonomically explicit observations. They need to be ecosystem agnostic, or in other words, be generalizable across realms. They need to be scalable in space and time, and also need to be feasible. And EBVs are organized across these 6 major areas that include, understanding how the genetic composition or allelic diversity of a community is changing over time, species populations, the traits of certain species of interest, community composition, how that changes over time, the ecosystem structure to which remote sensing data is very fundamental, and function. The way the EBV framework works is by merging primary observations that are collected in situ by, scientific projects, citizen science, things that include environmental DNA, for example, and merging these primary observations with satellite remote sensing fields that then can be synthesized into EBVs, which is this middle section of the slide, which are basically taxonomically explicit maps that or functions of biodiversity that have a time and space dimension, and that then can be synthesized even further into indicators that will inform the CBD framework, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, IPBS, and this type of other organizations in a much simpler manner. An example of how the EBV framework is helping these organizations is, for example, right now, species populations are being used, the species population EBVs are being used for deriving species habitat index and species protection index that are then used to address goal A and target 2 of the post-2020 agenda, to basically identify areas that require protection or areas that after protection would maximize conservation of species. GeoBond has an EBV data portal that is openly available for public use by governments and scientists and biodiversity stakeholders around the world, and you can visit the data portal on this link. And I'm going to close this presentation by giving you an overview, a flavor of how GeoBond is organized geographically and thematically. Right now, GeoBond has 6 national and regional bonds. One of the largest one is the one in China. In the Americas is the Colombia bond. France is its own bond. And then there are regional bonds that are organized around the Arctic, the Asia-Pacific region, and the Americas. Now, there are a suite of thematic bonds that are addressing specific, particular elements of biodiversity. For example, for the marine realm, the organization that is providing support to GeoBond is the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, which is basically the marine branch of GeoBond. And there is an Asia-Pacific version of this. And then for things like soil and freshwater, you have these other thematic bonds. And with this, I will close my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Remember that you can put your questions in the chat, and we will be answering at the end. Now, our next speaker is Patricia Motes from the Escuela Politécnica Nacional in Ecuador, from the Geophysical Institute. Patricia, floor is yours.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Oh, dear. Aquí está. Do you see it, Pilar?
No yet. Now, yes.
Okay, it's a great...
Pero no está en modo presentación todavía. Y tienes la última página, and you have the last page. So.
That's right. Yeah, great. Thank you. How's that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We're still seeing the last page.
Now I've moved it here to the first page.
Yeah, the one that we see on screen is still on the thank you concluding slide.
Huh. But just click on the first page.
I've clicked.
Maybe stop presenting and do it again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
And now you can put in presentation mode.
Yes, it is in presentation mode. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. I was asked to give this talk by Stefano Salvi, who's the head of Supersites, which is geohazard supersites and natural observatories. And I am the representative of Ecuadorian volcano supersite, of which there are 13 in the world, of which they provide data, satellite data, taken from a variety of satellites in order to know more about, in this case, volcanic activity or of activity along faults. And it is a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm a professor and researcher at the Instituto Geofísico in Quito, Ecuador. We are an academic institution, but also Ecuador's prime institute for monitoring volcanic and seismic activity. And I've known Pilar for some years also. We've worked together during crises, eruptive crises of various volcanoes in the past. So it's really good to see you, Pilar. And there are 14 supersites within the world, some of them in Iceland, San Andreas Fault, which you've all heard of.
Patricia, I hate to jump in, but we're still seeing the summary slide for the intro.
I just don't understand it because it's going here quite well.
Sure. If you really quickly can upload it to the Google Drive, I can share it on my screen.
I sent you the slide. I sent you the presentation.
Yes, Albert is going to put it because yours doesn't go on.
I don't understand. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I really am.
Don't worry. These things happen. And it's good to see you here too.
Yeah.
I just heard the news from Quito. Meanwhile, there is more earthquake and there are some people dead. They were working on construction.
Well, it was very strong. It was only 4.3 kilometers depth, and it was right along the fault below Nayon. So there were some slides that were important. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're there.
Thank you, Albert. Okay. So there are a number of geosupersites in the world, and these sites based on especially the need in order to give early warnings before volcanic activity, and also having the capacity to be able to process the data, have been chosen in order to have access to data from the Italian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, the German group on space data, as well as several others. So it's a very important responsibility. Albert, could I have you change that, please? Because it doesn't work here. Thank you. So here are the Supersite Coordinators of this GEO initiative: Hawaii, Iceland, Etna, Campo Falegra and Vesuvio, North Anatolian Fault, Taupo Volcano, Ecuador volcanoes, the Gulf of Corinth, also near Greece, and then the San Andreas Fault, Southern Andes in Chile, site in Africa dealing with Virunga volcanoes in the Congo, Chamkatka, in this case it's in Russia, China also dealing with faults, and Nicaragua, which recently opened their site back in August. So it is a great effort to host one of these sites because you have a lot of processing to do with the data. It also is important to have an academic institution as well as people who are accustomed to dealing with great amount of data. Please change this slide, Albert. So in Ecuador, we have approximately 40 potentially active volcanoes. And the satellite images that I was referring to, which are available every 10 to 12 days, come from Sentinel-1, TerraSAR-X, Cosmos Skywind. In my case, are being continuously processed to detect possible increases of volcano flank deformation. And the Ecuador volcano supersite is fundamental in providing this imagery. Changes, should we detect them because we're processing the data, I have people processing for 13 different volcanoes, are reported in spot or special reports to the Risk and Emergency Management Ministry, the Secretaría Nacional de Gestión de Riesgos y Emergencias, local authorities, and the public. So here's Ecuador is a small country, about the size of Colombia. It has 17 million people. And we have some of the most, we have one of the densest volcano groupings in the world. So it's very, very important to be able to monitor our volcanoes almost in real time, as we do with seismic instruments, but also with satellite imagery to be able to detect changes that are happening possibly quite rapidly. So I'll show you some examples now, and then I'll answer some of the questions that were asked to be referred to. So one of these volcanoes is in the Galapagos Islands. It's called Fernandina. And here we are able to see, this is a scale on the right, and the velocity map of deformation obtained from INSAR, interferomic satellite radar. And we have descending orbit images in this case. And this volcano is experiencing 40 centimeters of uplift within the last year. This is a very, very high rate of uplift within the caldera, but now it's also expanding to the southwest flank. This was reported in a special report it was on the 12th of November to the Secretaría de Gestión de Riesgos, the Parque Nacional de Galapagos, all the public, and 1.5 million of our followers on Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so forth. So here is our website, and this report is on the website. We've had a few people call. The press, for instance, wants to know what's happening. So keep going, please. And you're able to see in this case where it started about May of last year. And now it's gone up. Here we have a scale here. It's gone up to over 400 millimeters of change. And so this is very important until the processing was done on the 21st or 31st of October. And in this case, Fernandina is presenting notable positive deformation, particularly in the caldera. This manifestation may be a premonitor of future eruptive activity in the coming weeks to months. There are no human settlements on the island, but there are a lot of iguanas, bird life, big turtles, and so on and so forth. And a lot of tourists are floating around the island also in boats. But nonetheless, we have given an early warning at this case, and we will continue to monitor it. There's a certain amount of seismic activity, which is done with also another set of data that's being collected continuously. So we're able to give this early warning that the volcano could have changes very rapidly in the near future. Please change. So another volcano that we closely monitor, which has been erupting very strongly now for the last year and a half, is called Sangay. It's in a national park called Sangay National Park. It's a volcano which is around 5,100 meters high. And there's a big gulch which is opened up on the east side, which we are concerned about because the volcano has had big avalanches in the past. With the INSAR monitoring, we're able to see in this color, in this graph on the left, is that where it's yellow and orange, that there is about, if I'm not wrong, about 16 centimeters of uplift. And you can see these little lines here, which mean it correlate with eruptions. And this volcano has been producing stronger activity, particularly the last important eruption was in May of this year, but it spreads out ash and generates lahar. Some of the ash has gone to Guayaquil. Some of it's covered many of the banana lands on the coastal plain of Ecuador. And these upticks are anticipated by positive flank deformation as of May 2021. Please change. So here on this graph, which also shows the seismicity, which also shows the gas levels coming out of the volcano, we see a very close correlation with the amount of gas coming out in the green, also done by satellite, called Motes, and then also of the INSAR values coming up from the satellite processing. You're able to see that correlating also before that main eruption. So please go on. And Cotopaxi volcano, I'm happy to say, the last time I saw Pilar in person was during this time of 2015. We had eruptive activity. It was very concerning, but we were not at that time processing with INSAR yet. It takes quite a bit of time to get up to speed and do all the processing and have a team of people doing that. But here we can see velocity maps, in this case from TerraSAR X imagery from 2020 of January to a couple weeks ago. And basically the color blue and aquamarine basically means that there is no inflation going on around the volcano. And the same stands for here with Sentinel-1. So we're processing two types of imageries for Cotopaxi volcano. And the last volcano, which I will please go on, is that, I guess there isn't another one, but the Ecuador volcano Supersite is beneficiary of the GS, that is the Geological Supersites and Natural Laboratory Initiative. And the examples shown here demonstrate the great utility to have SAR imagery, in which we then do frequent processing every week and process, in our case here, for 13 volcanoes in Ecuador, which has over 40 potentially active volcanoes. And super sites around the world, there are over 8,000 satellite images, which are provided every year by SEOs to the super sites. There's about 150 scientists involved. In my case, there's 4 or 5 of us who do the processing. And this imagery that we get, some of it's open, available, Sentinel-1, but others are, because we are super site, we're able to use them without cost. But I have to say that we've benefited from, please change. We have benefited from very close collaborations with the Istituto Volcanologico de Italia, JPL, NASA, University of Miami, University of Leeds in Great Britain with their COMET group, USGS. And I would say that, yes, we are very, very much involved with policymakers trying to mitigate disasters within Ecuador. We pride ourselves in giving an early warning. We've given many early warnings in terms of volcanological activity, but not necessarily with satellite imagery in the past, where this is a new basically an undertaking that we're doing in the last couple of years. We are funded by my university, by the Inter-American Development Bank, and by ECU 911, that is 911. And I would say what are the weaknesses might be the lack of institutional memory, and also frequent changes in personnel within the emergency response groups, because every time we train people and they come to know what we do, and I mean, we've been in existence from 1983, so we've done a lot of work, and we're a big institution in terms of monitoring volcanic and tectonic activity in Ecuador. And I think it's a strength that we're not just a monitoring group, but we're also an academic group. So we have students that are learning and partaking in our activities. And we do have a lot of outreach. We also work with citizen scientists. We've started various FAHIA groups around different volcanoes, and we give a lot of talks at the local level. In our case, we do have a lot of outreach with international groups, but our focus is within Ecuador, trying to understand the pulse of volcanism as well as earthquake activity. As Pilar just said, we did have an earthquake a couple of hours ago. I felt it very strongly in my house. It was 4.6 magnitude. And we will look at one of the GPS stations up above to see if maybe it detected the movement it was a very vertical movement. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope that it's been interesting so you all could see what we do. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. Very interesting talk, especially for me. Anyway,
Great.
Our next speaker will be Julie Turton. Did I pronounce it right?
You did. Can you hear me all right?
Julie is from NOAA, also National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She's leading the One Health and Integrated Climate and Weather Extremes research. So, Julie, the floor is yours. Looking forward to see what you say.
Thank you, Pilar. Can you hear me all right, first of all?
Perfect.
All right, so let me see if I can do share screen and see how this works. Everybody else has struggled. I'm a little bit worried because I'm not the most technologically advanced here, but hopefully this will go out all right.
Perfect. Now you can put it in presentation mode.
Present mode. Yeah, I think we're there.
Yes. Perfect.
All right. That was the hardest part of this whole thing right there. So my name is Julie Turton, and I am representing the Geo Health Community Practice and our Earth Observations for Health initiative here. And I have to say, I'm going to go through a couple slides that tell you about our community of practice. And then the end is what I think is probably of greatest interest, certainly to me and hopefully to you, about why it's been important for us to actually become a priority for AmeriGEO and the difference it's made even in just 1 year. So if I can just figure out how to use my slide. Oh, there we go. So our community of practice is really about using Earth Obs for health decision making. And this is just a very short overview of kind of how we function. I feel like we might be relatively new to most of you, so I wanted to give you a short overview. And I know it's 2:14 when I started my time, so I'm trying to be cognizant of time. But our entire goal is to really stimulate the use of Earth observations for health decision making. And we do it through a number of ways. There's actually an initiative that has funded programs, which I'll talk about very briefly. And then we have weekly, bi-weekly, sometimes monthly teleconferences. We used to do monthly. And then during COVID, we ended up doing weekly conferences because this ended up being the place where the community could actually talk about what were the environmental drivers for COVID? What did we know? What did we not know? Who was making a forecast and was it working or not? It was a very neutral space, and it ended up being just a place where everybody come. Our phone calls were a couple hundred people every week for a while. So we were really grateful. We created the opportunity for that to happen. And that's exactly what we want. We learned a whole lot about what we should observe, what kind of products are needed, fostering collaborations through that. We do other things, like our fall meeting is usually where we have our annual meeting, but we have had our community practice annual meetings around the world over many years. We've been around since 2010. So if any of you are interested in getting involved and want to host a meeting, by all means, let us know. And then we've done the Geo thing, the Geo symposiums and like, but the last one here is AmeriGEO week. And so I really just want to spend a very short period of time on what our projects are that we're funding, because it kind of lays a bit of a foundation for why this work with AmeriGEO is so important, why being a kind of a core part of your community is important for the health group. There were projects that are funded that are working on aspects of infectious disease or other health prediction systems. Dengue, the first one here is on dengue. That is a global effort, but it certainly would apply to any parts of the world. That's the whole point. We want to build things that we can then use elsewhere. And so you'll see where some of the other communities of practice and Geoglam and Geogloss, they're a little further along. We've got the pieces, and I hope that by the end of this, you'll see where we're trying to go in building some more integrated capacity to do predictions and to do early warnings and to do, really advanced planning on some of these health-related risks that can be informed by Earth observations. So one of the projects is on dengue. One is on vector-borne diseases, specifically in the Americas. One is on cholera, which could have applications in the Americas. The particular work is focused in Africa, and it's actually being used by UNICEF and UK Meteorology, UK Meteorological Services to build predictions for cholera in parts of Africa where it's at high risk. So that could be also extrapolated to other parts of the world. There has been a lot of work on cholera in the Americas too. So kind of integrating that into something that helped us manage and predict cholera for the world would be really cool. And similarly with malaria, this is funded. These are funded by NASA actually. And so really trying to get to how do we use Earth observations to predict health-related risks. And then the last one I put here, because it was actually a global project to begin with, but has implications for the Americas on Shigella and other water-related illnesses, which is a category of health impacts that we often don't, I think, give enough attention to. And it's really hugely impactful, both in terms of life, but also productivity and quality of life, and other things that we should be measuring as well. And this particular work I highlighted because it allowed us to then be able to provide some additional resources to look at what the environmental drivers of COVID were. There were some similarities in the project. So the point is that we've got some core funded projects that are really about building the capacity to predict and prevent, and that also allow us some flexibility to be able to respond when something like COVID happens, which hopefully doesn't happen very often. All right, so that we have our community of practice with our regular meetings, and we expand or contract based on the need. We are meeting bi-weekly now, and at the end, I will give you that link again. So if you're interested in participating, please join. But the point of this conversation was really how, we're the newest priority for AmeriGEO. So I wanted to share with you some of what we felt were, the real benefits to us and hopefully benefits to you, and then a few ideas for the path forward, okay? So we've got all this stuff going on. We've got our community of practice. We have our initiatives that are already funded. But what this allowed us to do was to focus on a region and really do a deeper dive into building these partnerships. So the Pan American Health Organization, which is, the World Health Organization regional focus here in the Americas, we had partnerships with them. They'd come to our meetings, but we hadn't done anything together yet. It's like, oh, yes, this is a good idea. Well, they are hook, line, and sinker. And now they actually opened, were on the panel, thanks to AmeriGEO. They were on the panel at AmeriGEO Week in the opening session. That was a huge deal to actually get the health institution, the health community on the panel at the opening session. Not only that, but we had a whole health focus session with, I think, almost 60 participants. And the reason that I mentioned, if you look at the slide a couple down, we had this session, but there were so many posters, we really wanted to kind of do a deeper dive. So after AmeriGEO Week, the community practice had 2 more sessions where we had everybody from AmeriGEO that was doing posters and other people even do a deeper dive on what are you doing? What are the collaborations you need? What are you missing? You know, what are the opportunities here? So we really, really made a concerted effort to take advantage of the amazing enthusiasm that being a part of AmeriGEO created for our community of practice. So PAHO was a big part in terms of building that partnership. The other one was the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, really a core partner in all of this, making it happen. So the GEO Community of Practice hosted the session, but one of the things you'll see a little bit further down is this informed funding opportunities by Belmont Forum. Belmont Forum, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of this, but I have a slide in just a minute on it, but that's a funding opportunity. And what we did with the AmeriGEO week, we had our health session, and then we actually had a follow-up scoping on what are the both scientific and institutional opportunities and barriers for this. So we really are informing future funding opportunities through all of that. So the ones in red are really like what we made out of just 1 week, but it wasn't 1 week. It was a whole year of being engaged with each other that allowed us to really make the most of that week. So I think if nothing else happened, and a lot of other things did, that partnership being, you know, a focus area of AmeriGEO, and then, you know, participating in AmeriGEO week and doing a few other things in conjunction with that and some follow-on was great. And there was still even more than that. I will put doing the leveraging and training partnerships and capacity building. IAI has now, the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research has now focused some of their training and capacity building programs on climate, environment, and health, and is really excited about this partnership with GEO to really strengthen ties with the Earth Ops community. So I think that's been a very huge success in a pretty short period of time. And the other thing is, the reason I spent just a little bit of time on the funded research before is it allows the research that, you know, say looking at the dengue modeling, the examples were in Asia, but that kind of work could be tested in other countries and other cities too. And it would allow the capacity to be shared and lessons to be learned. So does it work in, you know, in Brazil somewhere? Does it work in Argentina? Does it work in some particular city? And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, why does it not? So I think there's a lot of sharing and lessons learned to be had on the existing work that's going right now, even without a lot of extra money. And then if something does want to be, you know, does seem to lend itself to being replicated or duplicated, then we can figure out how to make that happen. So that's really kind of building on the research that's already underway and finding that synergy. And then the last one is a small but really significant piece. And the last one is about some institutional change that this is already affecting. And the World Health Organization and the World Meteorological Organization have a joint study group on climate services for health. And that group, its job is to really provide recommendations to those organizations and other entities that need to influence that on how to better deliver climate services for health. And so some of the conversations we're having here at AmeriGEO Week, the follow-on conversations, and what I'm about to tell you that IAI is doing in Belmont Forum are absolutely informing the regional consultations that we're setting up that will help us decide on the WMO/WHO front what guidance we can give to the international level, what guidance we should be providing to the national level, what kind of support, what kind of mandates changes. Obviously, funding is always important for all of us, so we can't control that, but we can certainly bolster the arguments for it. So I think if you look at both the science community and the integration, the influence on funding, the ability to better understand the observational and research requirements, in 1 year, we've actually really done an amazing job. When I put this together, I was like, yeah, that's been a pretty productive year. And we're really, really grateful for the opportunity to have engaged with you more completely. All right, so that's not the end of the slides though. I wanted to do just a little bit more on what the Belmont Forum is, because one of the questions that, you know, was posed to us as presenters was, what kind of impact is this having on, you know, funding, on partnerships and the like? And I want to say, not a whole presentation on Belmont Forum, but Belmont Forum is a group of funding organizations, both national science foundations and others. And this climate, environment, and health focus that Belmont Forum has is unique to it and to a lot of the institutions involved. So this is the second round. And I will say, after the health session at AmeriGEO Week, we did a whole scoping workshop for Belmont Forum CEH2. We could only do that. We focused on the Americas. We could only do that because we were part of AmeriGEO. You were very supportive. We had a side session associated with you. I think we had a lot more attendance because of our association with you. And this is what goes into helping the institutions that are funding, of which there are 18 interested institutions around the world in this topic right now that are willing to come to the table with money. And they're trying to figure out what we're going to fund. So this is the only, well, we've had 2 scoping workshops. This one was the first and definitely well-structured. Look at that, 97 attendees from 35 countries, the different sectors engaged, from academia to government to NGOs. That would never have happened if we were not really affiliated with AmeriGEO. I can guarantee that. So thank you for that. The last part is it really helped us come up with some of the real research gaps, which is kind of the whole point. Now, how we fill them and where the money comes from, that's still an open question, but at least we have some clear things that we're trying to seek and gaps we're trying to fill. So I think that was, to me, a huge success in terms of our collaboration. So we have the engagement of scientists just in the existing projects. We have some institutional collaborations with PAHO, IAI, and hopefully others. We have the potential to influence at least that funding and hopefully other types of funding down the road that maybe we don't know about, but you do. And then in the path forward, I think we want to continue to build those and really work with you all a little more closely in a different way over the next year to engage other, like the ministries of health, for instance, with PAHO and you, academia as well. I think the other part is that IAI is going to be launching some training programs in climate, environment, and health. We should be doing that together. They are very open and interested and willing. So I think at least we'll circulate across the communities. And the last piece here is collaboration on heat and health. There is a real interest through the Global Heat Health Information Network, which is a part of our community of practice, to really help cities around the world build the capacity to be heat resilient, not just during a heat wave, but how do we manage heat risk over a period of time? And so what we're hoping is that we can get at least one city, a country that comes to the table and say, yes, we've got some minimal resources to be at the table and build this capacity over time and work in the future. And then building out a little work on wildfires, water resources, and ecosystems and health. So those are the things that we're looking for in the future. And then I heard a lot of interesting, potential for emergency management and disaster connections before, which is always an issue and an opportunity. So I think with that, I should be done. And I will thank you for the opportunity. And here's how to reach us. And here's the community practice call. If you're interested in joining or following up, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Next speaker is Jim Nelson. He's going to talk about water and Geogloss. Jim, please go ahead.
Okay. Let me start my presentation, make sure that this is going to work in presentation mode. You all see that?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I'd like to take just a few minutes and share a little bit about the efforts of the Geogloss Initiative in the Americas.
Jim, we're seeing the summary slides.
What's that?
We're seeing the summary slides on the top. So it's the speaker view.
Okay, let me swap the display. Does that look better now?
Yes,
better.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Jim Nelson. I'm a professor of hydrology at BYU, and I've been involved in the Geogloss project, specifically in developing the global stream flow forecast from ECMWF. But I can't ever pass a presentation without acknowledging the most important co-investigators, my wife and my family. And I'm grateful for them. I couldn't do any of this without them. And I hope that I know that you all have families, and it's a great opportunity to remember how grateful we are for the support that they give to us. Well, we're trying to take a global hydrologic model and provide that information and go from global resources that have to be downloaded and used at local levels to being able to use those as a service. And so this is the paradigm shift that we've tried to make, specifically in using the example of the ECMWF Global Streamflow Forecast. And it really revolves two important challenges. Number one, do we have a global model that's sufficient, accurate, gets good enough data for use? And number two, how can we make it usable as a service to take that information and make it available to those that need it for decisions? So what we've been trying to do is use some of the best available technology. We use the ECMWF land surface model. It's a gridded hydrologic forecast that we then map to watersheds at smaller scales so that we can predict runoff, so we can map that overlay onto our basins, and we can route that water through the rivers and produce a forecast and a historical simulation, or historical representation at every river of the world. So there's two primary data products that result from the Geogloss Global Streamflow Forecast. First is a 40-year historical simulation on every river that's very valuable in analyzing what's happened in the past. It helps us put in context then the other data product, which is a 15-day ensemble forecast. It has 52 members so that we have a probability and we can understand the uncertainty associated with the forecast. And the historical then puts in context whether that's an extreme flood or not. This is really novel in that it makes this service, even though it's a global model, derived from gigabytes of information and data and developed on supercomputers. It's available simply to any user through a REST API that allows just a simple URL access that can then be downloaded. So on your river, you can get the streamflow forecast. It's also been generated into a Python library that makes it more easily accessible and integrated within other applications and other initiatives, as we've seen in other sessions today. This then shows the map service. It's a custom map service from Esri that allows us to then show that on every river of the world. Esri's helped us do the mapping service so that we can animate and show in space and time where we might have extreme events. So this actually is a picture of during the Hurricane Eta and Iota last year. You can see that all of the rivers were experiencing extreme events, and those colors show up based on return periods and in terms of extremity, and also thickness in terms of the overall flow rate that's in that river. So this is a short little animation that shows how that process works, and here you can see in time throughout the 15-day forecast the thickness and the color of the river change according to the overall predicted discharge and whether or not that's an extreme event. All of these apps, the global streamflow is available at the apps.geogloss.org site, and from there you can run these services. Here you can see the web mapping service is available, and as you zoom in, the scale of the map increases so that we see at a higher resolution the map density. You can control the map, as well as you can select any given river. Each one has an ID, and then using that REST API, you can generate the current forecast, and then look at whether or not it's maximum. You can look at all the probabilistic parts of that hydrologic forecast. So that's the global viewer. Because this is a service, it's available and can be customized, but I also wanted to point out that Geogloss, we're working on more than just streamflow. In fact, I noticed in the previous presentation for the EO for Health, the GLDAS service that's provided from the NASA's Global Land Data Assimilation System, but we also have other tools that bring in observational data, in situ information. We've been working with the WMO and their WHO's project for combining that information We've been using the GRACE mission to look at groundwater data. And we also have a meteorological data explorer that allows for examination of other precipitation forecasts, of temperature, of evapotranspiration, other important essential water variables that can be exposed through similar kinds of tools. As I mentioned, these can be customized so that individual, because it's a service, we can have these tools made. Here's some of the different customizations in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, where we had our initial project with NASA Surveyor that helped develop these tools. Also with CRH, we've done a lot of work with CRH and SICA in Central America to provide customization there. And now more recently in the Severe Amazonia project and working in Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia, countries that are part of the Amazon region. So an important aspect in making a global model useful at a local scale is being able to connect it to ground observations so that we can understand and improve the global Earth observation and global modeling data. As I mentioned, we've been working with the WMO and their WHO's project in order to do this. And this has allowed us then to take ground observations and then correct the bias associated with the global model, since the ECMWF can't be everywhere on every river in the world. In order to improve and calibrate and update their model, we've now been able to provide these tools that connect it to ground observation. This allows us to correct the bias, which in turn can correct the forecast at those locations. And so these are tools that we have been creating as part of our Severe Amazonia project. We've been working with these countries in different hydrometeorological services in order to incorporate the bias correction with their local ground observations, and then provide custom tools that use these data services, both the mapping and the historical and forecast data service, so that they can develop this information. They're combining it with their own forecast systems as a way to improve, as well as in other areas where they just don't have this level of hydrologic information in order to make decisions. Looking ahead, and as also part of our Severe Amazonia project, we're moving from a hydrograph, a time series of runoff, to flood maps. We generate these from satellite data, from SAR imagery, overlay with exposure data so that we can determine the impact and then be able to convey that to decision makers. And this is really this is one of the things we can do when we open up the data, make it available. Here we're looking at time series historical imagery of satellite flooding data, and then we can make a correlation through machine learning with the time series of flow. And so that we can correlate now, we can actually predict the synthetic, if you will, or forecasted imagery that we would expect to see based on similar discharges or flood levels from before, so that we can actually forecast a water map, not wait for the satellite to be able to see it. And so these are some new parts, investigations that we're making, but illustrates the power of opening up data, making it available and sharing, combining with these different initiatives that we're trying to do within Geogloss. And with that, I will end, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with many of you in advancing these tools, and I look forward to our continued collaborations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Due to time constraints, we're going to collect the questions, and the speakers will send you directly the answers. So now we're going to have our project demonstration.
Hola Pilar, hola a todos, buenas tardes. Bueno, so just a quick thing. I gave the presentation that I'm going to give now this morning. So I'm going to do the presentation here in Spanish. Y bueno, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros, por venirnos a acompañar y por todas las actividades que, bueno, en donde estamos. Gracias a los principales que están aquí acompañándonos. Tengo hoy acompañándome a Sofía Lu. Este es lo que vamos a presentar. Es una El tema este año dentro de Geo Global ha sido la integración. Integración no solamente multisectorial, sino a todo nivel, ¿sí? Entonces, para esta mañana, la sesión de integración, escogimos la cuenca del Paraná y vamos a contar una pequeña historia en términos de, como una demostración de traer diferentes tipos de información. Entonces, bueno, voy a iniciar. Y ustedes saben que se requieren enfoques multidisciplinarios para abordar todos los complejos los problemas ambientales que tenemos. Y desde el momento en que se estableció el Grupo de Observaciones de la Tierra en el 2005 por la tercera cumbre de observaciones de la Tierra en Bruselas, GEO ha promovido las actividades y la colaboración en apoyo a las prioridades de participación de GEO que son representadas en la Agenda 2030 de las Naciones Unidas, el Acuerdo de París y el Marco de Sendai. COVID impuso una restricción en cuanto a que esa década de avances se vio frenada. Entonces, en este momento estamos analizando mucho más de cerca las conexiones entre los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, la adaptación climática y las metas de reducción de riesgo de desastre, porque tenemos que acelerar el progreso. Aprovechando los avances que tenemos de las observaciones de la Tierra, los servicios de procesamiento en la nube, las herramientas abiertas y también guiados por la estructura, por la implementación de la arquitectura de interoperabilidad, entonces en ese momento podemos iniciar la conversación entre las diferentes actividades temáticas para identificar cuáles son los desafíos, cuáles son las oportunidades, qué áreas necesitan más investigación y más tecnología para lograr que el conocimiento sea integral, ¿sí? La demostración que hoy vamos a hacer es sobre una integración horizontal. Vamos a traer información de agricultura, de energía, de cambio de uso de la tierra, básicamente para pintar una visión de lo que GEO debe hacer para ir más allá de simplemente producir o movilizar datos o servicios individuales, hacia una visión que acelere la transformación en productos y servicios multidisciplinarios basados en este conocimiento integral. Bueno, este desarrollo que está acá, quiero darle el agradecimiento inmenso al programa, a todos los miembros del programa GeoPathways, que han sido realmente puesto más del tiempo que se les ha pedido. GeoPathways es un programa que está patrocinado por el Departamento de Estado aquí en los Estados Unidos, pero en este momento ya tenemos un GeoPathways también en el Perú. Eso lo dejaré para otro momento, pero la idea es avanzar y expandir ese programa de GeoPathways con estudiantes graduados y de pregrado para construir capacidades en nuestra región. Bueno, entonces voy a utilizar una herramienta abierta que se llama Terria, que permite básicamente traer diferentes capas al mismo tiempo. También permite hacer análisis espaciotemporales de la diferente información que recibe. Entonces, como dije, voy a utilizar la cuenca del río Paraná, principalmente porque es una de las últimas emergencias climáticas que tenemos. Entonces, poca información sobre la cuenca del Paraná. Proporciona agua a 40 millones de personas en Brasil, Paraguay, Bolivia y Argentina. Y obviamente la mayoría de la población está ubicada en los centros urbanos más grandes como Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Rosario, Asunción y Brasilia. Si comparamos el río, ¿sí? Paraná con el Mississippi, el Paraná en longitud es la mitad del Mississippi, pero tienen un caudal casi idéntico de 17,000 metros cúbicos. Desde un estudio que hubo desde la NASA entre el 70 y el 2018, indicaba que el caudal del río estaba incrementándose. Llega el 19 y el 21 y el caudal se reduce a 7.000 metros cúbicos por segundo, o sea, de 17.000 bajó a 7.000. Voy a hablar sobre una de las partes de ecosistemas más importantes. Voy a hablar sobre el pantanal. En términos de biodiversidad y ecosistemas, la cuenca del Paraná tiene uno de los humedales más grandes del mundo. Ha sido referido como el humedal continuo más grande del mundo. Es aproximadamente 10 veces el tamaño de los Everglades aquí en la Florida. Posee una riqueza biológica infinita y funciona como regulador del sistema hidrológico de la cuenca. Desafortunadamente existe ya evidencia de que este ecosistema está amenazado por una serie de actividades, incluidas la minería, la caza, pesca ilegal, el desarrollo avanzado de agricultura y deforestación. Voy a muy brevemente hablar sobre el cambio de la tierra. Los cambios de la tierra, un dato significativo, en el 1970, la distribución de la tierra de estas dos clasificaciones, agricultura y bosques, era del 17% de agricultura y de 83% de bosques. Eso era en el 1970. Si nos movemos al 2008, es básicamente va un giro de 180 grados. El 75% ahora es agricultura y el 25% son bosques en esa relación de esas dos categorías únicamente. Hablemos de energía y voy a hablar de Itaipú, la represa más grande. En la parte brasilera de la cuenca del Paraná tiene un potencial inmenso de producción de energía eléctrica, tiene más o menos unas 150 represas y Itaipú produce el 15%, la capacidad instalada en Itaipú da el 15% del consumo total de energía en el Brasil. Si miramos el río, ¿sí? Debido a la infraestructura de control, o sea, hay 150 represas hidroeléctricas a lo largo del río. Entonces, ¿eso qué quiere decir? Que esas represas están sirviendo como infraestructura de control. Entonces, las inundaciones a lo largo del río Paraná, en la parte de Brasil, no hay problemas de inundación porque las represas sirven de control. Pero en la parte media y baja, en donde están las ciudades argentinas, entonces sí ese problema de inundación existe. Hablemos de agricultura. En la cuenca del Paraná, la agricultura, el riego es básicamente, en su mayoría está irrigada por lluvia y una porción muy pequeña es de irrigación. Les conté que anteriormente había hablado del cambio de uso de la tierra y a eso entonces, a esos cambios que el uso de la tierra ha influido en el flujo o en las características del flujo del río, quiero agregar la evapotranspiración, porque evapotranspiración asociada con la conversión de la tierra está contribuyendo a la reducción de precipitación. Desde el 2019, los niveles de lluvia en la cuenca han disminuido drásticamente y Argentina ha declarado, del julio pasado, declaró una emergencia por sequía que como una crisis, la peor crisis en los últimos 70 años. En términos económicos, la Bolsa de Valores de Rosario estimó que esta sequía del 2021, la Argentina ha perdido 620 millones de dólares en exportaciones de harina y aceite de soya. En este momento lo que estamos viendo es un índice de decibeles de riesgo de pérdida económica total por sequía Entonces, toda esta información que estamos trayendo es demostrando que realmente información sobre energía, agricultura, biodiversidad, podemos hacerlo, podemos integrarlo. Llegamos a Geogloss y voy a hablar de la disponibilidad de agua, que es cada vez menos predecible. La creciente incidencia de sequías e inundaciones está afectando la producción de alimentos y energía, las instalaciones de saneamiento, muchas actividades que son importantes para el bienestar de la humanidad. Entonces, la capacidad de pronosticar los extremos hidrológicos va a reducir la incertidumbre, aumentará la toma de decisiones de manera informada y vamos a poder desarrollar estrategias basadas en datos. En este momento, Sofía nos está mostrando información del sistema Geogloss ECMWF. Este es un servicio, como ya Jim lo mencionó, lo importante, produce pronósticos de caudal de cada 15 días a nivel mundial, pero en este caso que estamos evaluando la parte climática, la importancia son los 40 años históricos que existe dentro de Geogloss para poder entender las tendencias a largo plazo. Con esto llego a la presentación, a mis palabras finales. Esto simplemente tiene como nuestro objetivo es pintar una visión de cómo Geo puede llegar más allá de simplemente producir datos o movilizar, o en el caso de las iniciativas temáticas debemos trabajar conjuntamente y dejar trabajar en cajitas. Porque definitivamente todos estamos conectados. Tenemos que acelerar la transformación en productos, en servicios multidisciplinarios basados en este conocimiento integral. Ahora, reconozco que la parte científica y técnica no es la única parte de este rompecabezas. Debemos incorporar la parte de datos socioeconómicos, demográficos, todos los sectores, salud, todos los sectores que tienen que estar o que estamos interconectados. Quiero dejar mi presentación hasta acá y quiero agradecerle de nuevo a mis colegas de las iniciativas que han participado aquí, Geoglam, Geobon, todos los quienes participaron para poder crear esta pequeña inspiración hacia toda nuestra comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Angélica. Creo que esto muestra cómo trabajamos, ¿no? Thank you very much, Angélica. I have to apologize because Enrique Montes presented Cecilia's work, and I forgot that he has to present MBON, Marine Biodiversity Program. So, Enrique, please go ahead and make your presentation.
Sure. So we're very close to the hour, so I'll try to go through these slides as quickly as possible. But thank you, Maria.
Don't worry, I'm sorry.
No, no worries. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so I will present to you an effort that has been implemented for the past 4 years with NASA support to establish, or at least get started, a marine biodiversity observation network pole-to-pole across the Americas with the intent of supporting conservation and sustainable use of living resources in the sea across our continent. This is, I would say, the first regional implementation of a marine biodiversity observation network. So we're collaborating very closely with GeoBond that I presented earlier, but also the main goal of this program is to provide support to the biodiversity and ecosystems societal benefit area of AmeriGEO. So with this, I'm basically trying to communicate that or convey that we are working with a large number of institutions across the region and organizations, and I'm not doing any justice to all of the people that are participating in this and working together to advance this idea. So you already heard about me. So the main charge of this program is to develop a framework that would allow countries in our region detect the status and trends in marine biodiversity and understand really why it is changing over time in space, with the purpose of better managing living resources in the coastal zone, but also in the open ocean. And we try to achieve these by developing capacity in different areas, namely expanding our knowledge of biodiversity and its services, which is currently very limited. There are lots of gaps. We don't really know the status of biodiversity in most of the coastal areas in the continent. Most of the biodiversity survey efforts are not being coordinated, so they are disaggregated and not operating interchangeably. The data that is being collected and shared needs to be done in a way that it's consistent and standardized. So this is an area that we're working very intensively to increase our understanding of the physical environment with biological communities for this purpose, and most importantly, building capacity to foster the integration of in situ observations with satellite data. I would say, as one of the main contributions of the program to the Aguascalientes Declaration is that there is a very strong focus on making data, biodiversity data, that is being collected in the marine environment to follow FAIR principles, but also follow data workflows that ensure that data that is being collected is collected with best practices and standardized field protocols, but that it's also shared with a data schema that are accepted internationally. In this case, we're recommending the use of the Darwin Core data schema, so that all of the observations that are being collected across the region can be published in the Ocean Biodiversity Information System for public use. The program has carried out at least 2 large in-person workshops on these topics. One in Brazil in 2018, and one in Mexico in 2019, and more recently got involved with Africa, and I will tell you about it. But during these activities, we basically train participants in the use of and the applications of field monitoring protocols that have been agreed by the network, and also co-developed by network participants. We're training people in the use of novel machine learning techniques to extract taxonomic data from imagery and taxonomy and data workflows, so that people can actually visualize the data that they're collecting using open access software, and merge these observations with satellite data and make transformations of the data into the Darwin Core format, so that these can be then published and become of use for international frameworks like the Global Ocean Observing System under the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, of course, GeoBond. As I said before, we are also not limiting our capacity building efforts to the Americas, but we're also working with African nations, namely Ghana, Nigeria, and many other surrounding countries in Western Africa, where we have participated in the coessing summer schools to train oceanographers in Africa in the use of open source applications for accessing, visualizing, and analyzing satellite data relevant to the marine environment, things like sea surface temperature, the fields of surface chlorophyll, and time series of these variables, so that people can start understanding how their marine environments are changing over time and space. In these efforts, we train people on tools that we have developed for making the transformations to original data tables, to the Darwin Core schema, and we have provided for these many resources, things like manuals, actual code formats, but also video tutorials that would walk participants through this process very seamlessly. And the result of that is now the program has contributed over 20 new 1,000 taxonomic records to the Ocean Biodiversity Information System that are now available to these type of assessments in at least 12 countries in the region. We are collaborating very closely with Canada Fisheries and Oceans, where this is a governmental organization that is responsible for everything that is related to fisheries and oceans in Canada, and they are in the process of implementing the field protocols that we have developed as a network in the eastern side of Canada, and now slowly migrating to the west. As part of our collaboration that we have implemented with Instituto del Mar del Perú, which manages possibly the largest fisheries in the world, we are now advancing the development of applications that use satellite data. In this case, I'm showing you satellite seascape classification, which basically groups different biogeographic units or regions of the ocean into coherent biogeochemical provinces that can be used as a framework for evaluating biodiversity. These the black wiggle lines that you see going up and down the Peruvian coast are the surveys, the acoustic surveys that IMARPE conducts seasonally to measure the occurrence and abundances of very important fishes, taxonomic groups that are exploited commercially by Peru. And through this collaboration, we're evaluating how the seascape model can enable IMARPE understand and predict abundances of important taxa like anchovies, sardines, and jack mackerels at seasonal levels. We're also working closely with CONABIO, which is the agency in Mexico responsible for the assessment of biodiversity on land and in the marine environment. And the CONABIO has now contributed field protocols to the network. These are protocols that have been co-developed with CONABIO for different themes like, top predators, sea turtles, coastal environments, and seagrasses and coral reefs. But also, CONABIO has developed a very exciting platform that allows users access and visualize a variety of remote sensing products relevant to the Gulf of Mexico and Pacific waters around Mexico, to understand heat stress over benthic ecosystems and other type of products. And well, after this, I thank you for your attention and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Enrique.
All right, thank you all for joining. Apologize that we had to cut the Q&A session from the audience. I know we're running long. My dog even decided to jump in my lap to let me know that we're going a little bit over schedule. But to wrap up our session, we are going to hear from our other co-chair, Werner Stolz, who is the recently appointed representative and co-chair from Costa Rica. Handing over to Werner.
Thank you very much, Albert. I will talk in Spanish. Primero, muchas gracias a todos los expositores y expositoras del día de hoy. Sin duda alguna han mostrado la gran importancia que tienen las actividades temáticas expuestas para AmeriGEO. Toda la información que nos han brindado se ve potenciada en su enorme utilidad por los últimos resultados que conocemos en relación al cambio climático y sus impactos, por lo que serán herramientas que nos permitirán sin duda alguna manejar de una mejor manera los retos que tenemos a futuro. El uso de la información que brindan los satélites de observación terrestre y de tecnología sigue y seguirá demostrando que es la mejor forma de abordar integralmente todas las temáticas relacionadas con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Tal y como nos mostró Geogloss, mejorar la seguridad alimentaria produciendo y difundiendo información relevante, oportuna y procesable sobre las condiciones agrícolas y las perspectivas de producción es de vital importancia para las Américas, particularmente en aquellas regiones en donde la variabilidad climática se une al cambio climático para generar condiciones climáticas adversas, al grado de poner en riesgo la seguridad alimentaria, como pasa, por ejemplo, en el corredor seco centroamericano. De gran utilidad también ha sido la herramienta que genera FuseNet, la cual hemos usado muchas veces aquí, no solamente en Centroamérica, sino a nivel mundial, y nos alegra que en particular estén iniciando actividades con SICA, así como con varios países suramericanos. Servir Amazonía, un excelente ejemplo de cooperación entre socios dirigidos al desarrollo de soluciones geoespaciales, tales como gestión de ecosistemas, desastres, clima y tiempo. Es muy importante favorecer el co-desarrollo de los servicios y contribuir a la mejor toma de decisiones. Resiliencia urbana, de suma importancia, particularmente por las ciudades, porque las ciudades son las que presentan en muchos casos afectaciones recurrentes en muchos sentidos, no solamente en el hidrometeorológico. Actualmente los parques urbanos, ciudades inteligentes, la información disponible del usuario, así como las alertas tempranas, la mejora de la modelación para su aplicación y todos los datos satelitales que nos ha mostrado Resiliencia Urbana en este foro son realmente necesarios para favorecer que nuestras ciudades sean sostenibles. GeoBond, conformado por 123 países y 1.116 instituciones, es un excelente ejemplo de colaboración con el objetivo de consolidar la visión de continuar con una red mundial de observación, particularmente en las Américas, de diversidad biológica, que contribuya a políticas de gestión eficaces para la diversidad biológica y los servicios de los ecosistemas del mundo, desarrollando indicadores y variables robustas. Desastres, GSLN Supersite mostró uno de los usos de información satelital de gran utilidad práctica, tal y como se realiza actualmente en Ecuador y en otros países a nivel mundial como beneficiarios del Supersite. Salud. Actualmente las observaciones relacionadas con este tema son de suma importancia, dado que están contribuyendo a una mejora en la toma de decisiones, particularmente en dengue, malaria y cólera, tal y como se nos mostró, incluyendo la componente de alerta temprana, la cual es de suma importancia. También es muy interesante conocer que se están haciendo investigaciones sobre el tema de incendios relacionados con salud. Geogloss presentó una herramienta de gran utilidad, un sistema realmente que ha dado muy buenos resultados y particularmente la escala a la cual se generan este tipo de resultados. En Centroamérica lo hemos implementado para generar alertas con gran suceso, particularmente en Honduras, que lo utilizó para hacer toda la prevención relacionada con los huracanes Iota y Eta. La integración multidisciplinaria, con un mensaje de acelerar el progreso, se puede favorecer la concurrencia del conocimiento integrado de varias instituciones para dar como resultado una visión que vaya más allá de manejar simplemente datos de geo, utilizando, por ejemplo, la herramienta abierta Terria. Biodiversidad marina, en colaboración con GeoBond, enfocado a la conservación sostenible de los recursos del océano, nos parece una excelente iniciativa porque los océanos siempre se deben tomar en cuenta en el rompecabezas que nos comentaba Angélica. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos nuestros expositores, expositores y expositoras, y los invitamos a que sean activos en toda esta iniciativa de AmeriGEO, y aquí nos ha mostrado realmente las herramientas que pueden conducir a nuestro futuro desde el punto de vista de muchos puntos de vista y en muchas áreas que podemos aplicarlo para así avanzar rápidamente, como nos comentaba Angélica. Muy buenas tardes. Adelante, Albert.
Thank you, Werner, and that concludes our session. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us a few extra minutes. Greatly appreciate everyone's attention. A special thank you to GEO Secretariat for helping us organize this very insightful and productive side event for AmeriGEO, where we looked at the connection between the flagships and initiatives and the region. And also a special thank you to all of our presenters and our moderators. So Pilar, fantastic job. Thank you for leading a great discussion. and to all of the various presenters. As I said in the chat, if you have any additional questions, I copied all the chat. So we will be sending all your questions directly to the presenters to respond to you directly via email. If you have any questions following the conclusion of this event or would like to learn more about AmeriGEO, please feel free to contact the AmeriGEO Secretariat at my email, which was provided in the chat, but it's albert.degarmo@noaa.gov. And I'll be happy to address and pass those questions on. But once again, thank you to everyone for helping organize and facilitate this discussion. And we greatly appreciate your attention. So with that, we will go ahead and end. So enjoy the rest of Geo Week 2021.
Thank you, Albert. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Gracias, Pilar.
Everybody, gracias a todos.
Gracias a todos. Gracias, Verne.
Gracias, saludos. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Oh.